We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. The weekend is finally here. Congratulations, you made it. Hope that you are having a great weekend as we are coming to you live 10:30 Eastern Time on rumble.com/amradpod. Guys, make sure that you smash the thumbs up and give us a follow if you haven't already. If you listen to the audio format on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart, that will go up right after we get done recording. And make sure that you subscribe so you can get that. Go to your device, and we get done recording here on every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, the American Radicals Podcast. And today is the tradition. It is the Saturday grab bag. It's back here, folks. We're going to be churning and burning through a bunch of different stories from all over the place. It's going to be fun. It'll be a good time. Garrett and I will react to that. We're going to be talking about how the Department of Defense continues to push back on DEI. That's a good thing. The reemergence of a Homeland Security Disinformation Board, and that was revealed to Donald Trump, straight to him in a cabinet meeting. We have Hunter Biden, who's now dropped his lawsuit against the IRS. And then a story about Jim Jordan possibly being the biggest disappointment in Congress. And that's just a little smattering of what we got for today. We're excited to get to all of it. Before we do, let's thank the OG sponsor, the underwriter of today's podcast, and that's the True Earth Pharmacy. TrueEarth.co, TrueEarth.co, and the promo code that we have proprietary to our show is AMRAD25, AMRAD25, because it's 2025 and we're getting healthy in 2025. And that'll get you 10% off everything in the store. That includes everything in their fertilizer section, including the squid extract, which I've been told is getting amazing results. And if you have any questions about them, make sure you give them a call. Claude, the mad scientist, loves to get the American Radicals Podcast listeners on the phone asking questions about how they can improve their homestead and their garden. If you want to get personally healthy, look what they have in the pharmacy section, spelled with an F. If you got some pain in your life, if you want to concentrate, if you want to relax, all of that available, the turmeric trio, the mushroom supplements, the CBDs, even some supplements for your pets. All of it at trueearth.co. Promo code AMRAD25 will get you 10% off everything in the store. All right, without any further ado or delay, let's bring on Garrett. Find him on social media at GOBActual. We're going to be reaching into the grab bag today, sir. I'm excited to get to it. Hopefully your weekend is off to a good start in the Midwest, the land of Nineveh.
I can't complain too much, Steve, because what good does it do? It's, summer is not here yet. Let's just put it that way.
Winter's always coming.
Yes.
I want to get us kicked off. Look, let's get it's always tough to start, get the cobwebs out of your eyes. Maybe you got a chance to sleep a little bit late on a Saturday. You just want to ease on into it, get a little shot in the arm. You got your coffee there, I see. Get you a little extra boost here. And I don't know, let's see President just dunk on the media to get us started on a Saturday.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency? No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across the stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news. All right. Thank you. And by the way, ABC is one of the worst.
Look, we got our share of problems. But I think a lot of people said, I voted for that.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking during that clip, because just compare Joe Biden to Donald Trump. And even if you compare Donald Trump to Donald Trump 45, he's changed, he's older. Certainly the weaponization against him has aged him even more than probably he should be. But that that right there, does it get any better? That's the Donald Trump that I missed. That's the Donald Trump that I think was missed on the world stage. And he's absolutely right. We were a laughing stock to our enemies, to other countries. And by no means are all the problems fixed. Certainly not. If that was true, we wouldn't be doing a podcast anymore. But bring it on, DJT. I love it. Love to see it.
All right, this one I'm interested to get your view on because it involves the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth, another person who is pretty much maligned, particularly recently, and even through the confirmation process. I think he put out recently on his social media that he has 100% negative coverage in the media. So
Wow.
it only stands to reason why the opinions of the Secretary of Defense are kind of low. But Hegseth ends women's leadership program. Now, it doesn't sound good. And this is coming from NDT, which is Epoch Times, tends to trend to the right. But here's a quotation from Secretary Hegseth. This morning, I proudly ended the Women, Peace, and Security program inside the Department of Defense. WPS is yet another woke division social justice Biden initiative that overburdens our commanders and troops, distracting from our core task, which is war fighting. The WPS program was developed in response to the Women, Peace, and Security Act, which Trump signed into law in 2017. So the first Trump term, I think that was during the Me Too movement. So that was like the response to it. The cause was then taken up by Ivanka Trump because she's like, Daddy dearest, I want this thing done. Good thing she's not around. And the president's daughter, former advisor after it was signed into the U.S. law, and actually current Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she was a member of Congress at that point, South Dakota. She was a champion of this also. I am not interested in getting immutable characteristics in people and identifying that and saying, well, because of what you got dangling between your legs, we've identified you as being someone that we need to bring up into a position of leadership. I think that the merit system is particularly when the stakes are so high that you were fighting wars and you're worried about lethality. It goes without saying that like whoever embodies those characteristics probably needs to be put through the schools that are necessary to learn the skill set, because leadership isn't necessarily like inherent to people. There are certain things you can learn and they can be identified, the certain of the characteristics and the qualities that are make up a typical good leader who will thrive within a particular organization. And we can pull that out of you. We have identified a couple of those things and we want to give you the skill set. Identifying what your genitals are should not be a consideration.
No, absolutely not. And this has been true throughout the course of humanity.
Lost your sound, Garrett. I'll pull you back down. Yep, you're muted. Don't worry about it. We'll get it fixed up. You work that out, and yeah, your sound is completely gone.
Wait, am I
I'm gonna
back
pull
now?
myself up. You're back now.
Okay, sorry.
This is what
I
the
bumped
wonders
my
of doing a live podcast.
I bumped my mic and unplugged it. So right in the middle of my
Bad
thought,
leadership.
horrible leadership. But this has been true throughout the course of humanity, that it's not what genitalia you have, it's not the color of your skin, it's what characteristics do you have that we can build upon. And it makes me think actually of this conversation I had when I was in Iraq. Young guy, I don't even know if I had quite made buck sergeant yet. I might have still been just an E4 specialist. But the truck I rode on, I was actually the vehicle commander, Steve, which sounds a lot more highfalutin than it actually is. But my platoon leader was on my truck, and we had a lot of good conversations because we all had headsets on. The driver, the people up in the hatches, and most of the guys inside, like the cabin or whatever, didn't. But if you were out manning the gun or whatever, you'd have your headset on. You're able to key over to the other trucks or back to the company talk, the tactical operations center. But oftentimes we're driving to whatever, some other village, and we're in the truck a lot and chatting. And my platoon leader asked us, he was like, "Hey, let's just talk about leadership for a little bit. And what do you guys think? Is it nature versus nurture? Are you born with it or not? You know, can it be improved upon?" And I've shifted since then to some degree about how it can be trainable and how there are things, as you mentioned, that you can learn. I do think there are some inherent qualities that people can be born with, and then they can either grow in those ways or not. And for a good leader, it's a combination of both. And in my opinion. And I saw it time and time again in the military. I saw it in law enforcement. And with a program like this, oh, we're just going to elevate you because you're a woman. It makes no sense, especially for a fighting force, because one of the key ingredients to a nation's success is a strong military. That too has been historically proven time and time again. If you have a strong military, you're a strong nation. And when you start going down this road of, well, we got to start elevating this person or that person because of whatever qualities that we're going to arbitrarily select, your nation is in decline. That's all that is showing.
You're prioritizing things that are not in the business of breaking things and killing people, which is essentially the function of a military, right? And by default, if you prioritize anything else other than that, then your product or service, in this case, the warfighting ability, is going to suffer. And look, there's not a central casting stereotype leader that you have to be, even within the military context. I mean, I'm a history nerd. I talk about this with my kids. I've talked about this when I do public speaking engagements. Like you can't contrast like a Robert E. Lee and a Ulysses Grant more than on their presentation. Like you have Robert E. Lee, who tried to model himself after George Washington, prim and proper, and he always looked the part, right? That was very important to him. And he was a fantastic general for the Confederacy. Then you have Ulysses Grant, who modeled himself after Zachary Taylor, had mud on his boots, was like one of the guys. You could see the merits of both of those guys, but they had certain inherent qualities. I'm sure they both would have been in the school for finishing school for leadership. And it didn't have anything to do with the twig and berries at that
No,
point.
never did. And as I think of my military time, especially since that's what this is honing in on here, I think of the guys that stood out to me as exceptional leaders. Were they that quality or caliber of a leader when they were a brand new private? No, of course not. Did they have some of those qualities and characteristics? Probably. And then they were honed over time. And I think especially of my platoon sergeant who I had when I was in Afghanistan. I remember still vividly the day that I reported in for duty at Fort Campbell, Kentucky in the 101st Airborne. I'm sitting in the sergeant major's office and he comes and picks me up and I see it on his chest. His name is True Blood. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. And then he started to talk and I was like, oh, this guy does not mess around. And then as I got to know him better, I learned that he participated in both invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd gone to all, and that day he wasn't wearing everything on his chest. But later I saw him. He's got Pathfinder. He's got the Pathfinder torch, airborne, air assault. And then it turns out too, dude had been on like 9 deployments. Awesome guy. And I actually found out recently he passed away. And the last time I talked to him was the day we testified. And he texted me that day, and then we spoke that night, and just kind of caught up, and he was just like shocked that he saw me on the news and was just like, I'm just proud of you, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And I think of this guy as just this war fighter and this leader, but he had these other characteristics too. And of course, we're in the infantry, so we can get extreme in some ways with discipline or kind of ribbing one another or whatever. But he also had that other human side. I remember one time after I got out of the military, my wife and I, we went back down to Fort Campbell for a wedding, and we went over to this guy's house for dinner one of those nights. And um, when I think of like the whole package of a leader, it's not just strict adherence to military order and rule, and they're still human. There's a human side, an emotional side, and empathy side to it. But then also with this initiative or these overall what we can call DEI initiatives, the resistance that we're seeing, and even people on the so-called right, they participated in it too. I think it was like last week I saw this video of Nancy Mace getting accosted at the Publix or wherever she was, and she's like, her argument to the dude was, I voted for gay marriage. And it's like, that's not a winning argument for actual conservatives. That's another piece of the DEI decline that we see. And if we want to move it away, Steve, from the military, let me pop this up here. I know you saw this photo. It's the new FBI director, Kash Patel, on a run with the current agent class at Quantico. And what do you see? You see primarily women, and some of them clearly not up to physical standards. I see there's one of them boxed right here. There's there's no way she's passing a PFT, a physical fitness test. And so Pete Hegseth is saying, "Hey, we're doing away with this nonsense." Doesn't look like the FBI is, or at least not yet. And I know there's a process that they need to go through to change some of the DEI metrics there, but it's running rampant across the government. And honestly, I don't think we're seeing enough of a change with some of this crap.
Mhm. Well, let's pivot to another weaponized element of it. Like there's no limit to the subterfuge with the DEI and the military and the FBI and federal law enforcement. And we've talked about the Department of Homeland Security. It's 10x the budget of the FBI. They don't really get the acclaim because they haven't have the long-term Hollywood system behind it. They don't have the FBI. Thank you, Director Hoover and all of your acolytes for helping us produce this propaganda video here for 9 years in the 60s and 70s. But I do think it's worth going into what Marco Rubio, little Marco, who
Little Marco with his
he is
little
doing a
hands.
bunch of stuff now. He's like the acting director of 3 different agencies on top of being Secretary of State. Reporting at Fox News, Rubio reveals obscure Biden administration office kept a disinformation dossier on a Trump official. We don't know who it is. And J.D. Vance apparently in this cabinet meeting asked, is it me or Elon Musk? Like kind of as a joke. But this is actually really serious. So Secretary of State Rubio revealed during cabinet meeting the Biden administration's State Department kept dossiers on Americans accused of serving as, quote, vectors of disinformation, including a file on an unidentified Trump administration official. So he was referring to this office within the State Department, previously known as the Global Engagement Center. And it's now defunct. It was ended just before Donald Trump took office, but there is an archive. So I went to it. And it's information about the Global Engagement Center within the United States Department of State. And it says its mission is to direct, lead, synchronize, integrate, and coordinate U.S. federal government efforts to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining or influencing the policies, security, or stability of the United States. I mean, how many weeks do you think it took them to wordsmith that, by the way? But look, they have a couple of pillars here. Well, when I say couple, they have 5 pillars: analytics and international partnerships. And then there's the other ones where I'm like, oh, this is what this was. Programs and campaigns. Russia, China, Iran, counterterrorism teams are designed to build societal and institutional resilience. So they basically want to push back on Russian disinformation. Well, we were informed that if you said that the virus known as COVID came from a lab, that was Russian disinformation.
How dare you?
The Global Engagement Center, as opposed to on the issue of exposure, they coordinate with interagencies public exposure of foreign information influence operations. So look, I mean, the Hunter Biden laptop story, that has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. And then finally, technology assessment and engagement. The Global Engagement Center hosts private sector technology demonstrations and assesses and to counter disinformation technologies. Like we're going to send people out to Twitter and Facebook and tell them to censor this stuff. This Russian disinformation, after all. And I don't know if you recall this, but Garrett, we talked about this Department of Homeland Security initiative. They were going to push back on disinformation, right? And there was I played this when you were away, but I want to play it again because I think it's worth doing that. And that was the Nina Jankowicz.
Oh, yes, Steve. Yes.
Who was supposed to be the czar of disinformation before we get to it. She's got a set of pipes on her.
Mongering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo, and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet.
Okay.
Dude.
That's about enough
Dude,
of
I
Nina
mean,
Jankowicz.
let it rip for all 3 minutes. Okay, if you're not watching and you're not familiar with this clip, this woman, she's got it. You could see it in her eyes. When we talk about the 80% around 80% or more in and around the DC area who hate your freedom, who hate your rights, who lie about what this information is, because think of the gaslighting here in this clip. She made this whole song to gaslight you on what is true and what isn't. One, not the government's job. Two, in an alleged land of the free,
Look at those eyes.
look at those eyes, dude. Those are crazy eyes. But when we talk about that 80% swampy deep state, think of Nina Jankowicz. That's the type of person who is running your government, who is trying to thwart Donald Trump and his cabinet and all of his initiatives. And they may not all look like her and be so crazy, which, by the way, she should link up with like James O'Keefe and they should go on Broadway or something, but or off Broadway, because they both are atrocious, and to use her words. And uh they basically what it boils down to is they hate your civil rights, they hate your freedom, they hate that you have a brain and want to use it to find out the truth.
And look, we at the time talked about this disinformation ministry, right, that she was going to head up. And I think it's just worth throwing back out there just to remind people. And we said at the time, this will not go away. It's going to be whack-a-mole. It'll reemerge. And apparently it did. And Marco Rubio exposed it. And they got rid of that agency. But when we have a President Newsom American Psycho, it will rear its ugly head again. But just as a background, again, from the archives of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas, he knows where the bodies are buried, announces establishment of a Homeland Intelligence Experts Group. The expert group will provide Department of Homeland Security with a wide range of views and perspectives. The members included John Brennan and James Clapper.
Oh, great.
Okay. In fact, the combined political contributions of everybody named in this group was 98% Democrats. Just 1% went to the Republicans, which means that another 1% went to straight up the United States, Communist Party. And then there was this lawsuit that was filed that actually ended in the dissolution of this organization, this Homeland Intelligence Experts Group that America First Legal filed.
Which again, right there, if your government truly cared about your freedom and truly cared about the Constitution, truly cared about you seeking a life of prosperity and I mean, really just freedom, like we were founded on, it would not have taken a lawsuit to disband this. Heads would have rolled. The president, regardless of the side of the aisle that he comes from, would have said, "This is wrong. Who started this? Who's heading it up? And we need to handle them."
So America First Legal won this lawsuit, or they got a settlement, basically ended this intelligence group. But they also got discovery about what they were talking about. And for context of what this group, which hates your freedom and hates you so much, was actually building in another, when it was reconstituted and had a different banner, building dossiers on people who are now principals within the Trump administration. So in September 2023 meeting, the group complained there was no mandate for state and local partners to collect information. Their mission gained greater overall support after January 6th. The group noted that, quote, "See something, say something" campaign after 9/11 fell short because Americans have an ambivalent feeling of telling on each other. They wanted to encourage people to tell on each other. The question then became, how do we get into local communities in a non-threatening way? How do people safely report a concern about their neighbors? The meeting notes go on to say they want to discuss political dissent should be reclassified as a public health crisis because we had already done the coronavirus. That was public health. They gave them enormous powers. So if you objected to what the ruling elite wanted and you voiced that, that was a public health crisis. They suggested that the best way to combat domestic extremism, I don't know, like people that get up in the morning and run for 12 miles, is to get mothers and teachers to turn in their children to the federal government under the guise of public health.
Hmm. We mentioned it the other day on Thursday. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. Thomas Jefferson. I went and looked because I think I said Benjamin Franklin. And that's really what this comes down to. So, of course, Americans, because somehow many of us still have those deep seated roots of revolution where we say, you know what? I don't really want the government involved in my life. And barring something extreme, I'm not going to call the government to come and intervene. Now, we did see a massive shift in that way, at least from my perspective, during COVID, because you had cops showing up all over the place, and very few, I can only think of one, this guy out of somewhere near Seattle who ended up losing his job because he said, I'm not going to do this. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what law enforcement in America is supposed to be. Because a lot of people were saying, oh, my neighbors, they have more than 2 cars parked in their driveway, so they must have friends or family over, but we're not supposed to because of public health. And I don't know how you reel that back, because like this program with DHS and Nina Jankowicz and mis dis and mal information, that's, I believe, that group that she was heading up, that's when those terms really started to hit the public's sphere. I really don't know how you reel it back other than immense hardship for the nation. At, a war or economic hardship, we have to go through the tough times again because we are continuing to march towards just let the government intervene and call them for every little thing. And that's not an American principle. And honestly, it's not. I really don't understand how people get to that point where the nanny state where they just want the government to handle every little thing for them.
It's just so much easier to be told what to do. And on the subject of disinformation, you remember that Hunter Biden laptop, which was totally Russian
Totally.
disinformation and,
Yep.
and wasn't definitely in the possession of the FBI and used to prosecute him for a crime which he's now been pardoned for. Well, he filed a lawsuit against the IRS. But now, according to Empower Oversight, Hunter Biden has voluntarily dismissed the civil lawsuit against the IRS because those guys, Ziegler and Shapley, they actually went through the proper channels and brought the information to I think, the Ways and Means Committee, which is where you bring tax information. So he really didn't have a case. But Biden sued the IRS and accused those agents of violating his privacy by making protected whistleblower disclosures about him to Congress and by publicly speaking about information that Congress had already released. And then this is a joint quote from those guys. I'll just give this a read. It's always been clear that the lawsuit was an attempt to intimidate us. However, we were always motivated by doing the right thing, defending our work, and honoring our duty to the American people. So good on those guys. I mean, we don't have to break it down too much, but I do think it's interesting that now that the political winds have shifted and Joe Biden's having a hard time getting those $300,000 speaking gigs, Hunter's sugar daddy isn't really able to fund these lawsuits, and they probably said, like, cut bait and run. Now, we did sort of like evade the human Roomba or his underling in the form of Kamalamanism in November. You and I can quibble about things are not where we want them to be, but they could have been much worse. We could have been going in the direction of like full-on socialism, which is Canada, and that is the subject of the next couple of stories that I want to get to. This one comes from National Post. Ontario loses a battle to refuse to pay for a penis-sparing vaginoplasty for a
What?
non-binary resident. That is a
Oh,
title of an article in a news publication that is not parody.
that's a mouthful, Steve, and not just the penis.
Let's break this down, and I'm sorry I have to do this for you folks. All right. In a unanimous decision released this week, a 3-judge panel of the Ontario Court of Appeal confirmed a lower court's ruling. They said, yeah, the lower court got it right, ordering the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, OHIP, to pay for the patient identified as KS, Kyle Seraphin, in court records to undergo a novel phallus-sparing surgery in Texas. So this was the surgery is not even going to happen in Canada. The legal battle between KS, whose sex at birth was male, so oh no, it is Kyle. It started in 2022 when this legal battle began. when OHIP refused to fund the request for surgery because they have universal health care in Canada, this dude said, "I want you to make me a vagina, but preserve my penis." In a letter accompanying the request, her doctor said that because KS is not completely on the feminine end of the spectrum, then why are you calling KS her? National Post.
Dude.
It is important for her to have a vagina while maintaining her penis. This is a true story and not parody.
Steve, I don't even know where to start with this.
Just go directly to scripture, Garrett.
I that's really the only place we can go with something this absurd. I don't know, man. Canada, what are you doing? And they just had an election there, I think within the last week. And after everything they've been through with COVID, with the clear tyranny with Justin Trudeau, and now this, as if America wasn't bad enough. Now America's hat is even worse. And I know we talk about as California goes or New York, so goes the nation. Well, look at any of the other quote unquote free nations in the world: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Germany. Every single one is at least a step ahead, if not a couple steps ahead, down the road of tyranny than we are. And this is where it continues to march. Just think of how absurd this is. This guy, born a guy, wants to keep his phallus, but also have a vagina and wants the government to pay for it.
And pay for him to travel to Texas. Why is Texas, America, performing that surgery?
Yes.
So it is a problem with us. And look, if you were an ambitious nation state and you look hungrily at expansion right now, and you might look at America's hat and think like, hey, that looks like they're primed for the picking, seeing as how they're wasting money building fake genitals for people as opposed to, shoring up their borders. And they have lots of natural resources there, lots of maple syrup, in addition to the oil and timber that they do have, which is very valuable. Maybe we could engage in some sort of kinetic military action, but I mean, what would be the response? Well, I think you could probably get aggressive with them, seeing as the next story comes from Canada. Removal of tampon dispensers in men's bathrooms, quote, will not be tolerated, according to the Defense Department in
What
Canada.
the heck, dude?
The Department of National Defense, spelled with a C because they're fancy, says it won't stand for members of the Canadian Armed Forces removing or vandalizing the feminine hygiene fixtures now required in men's washrooms. So the actual door kickers, the crayon eaters in the military were like, this is some BS. I'm taking this tampon dispenser out of here. And they said it won't be tolerated. The Defense Department said removing the tampon dispensers and disposal units from men's washrooms undermines the department's efforts to create a, quote, inclusive environments for cisgender women, gender diverse individuals, transgender men, and intersex individuals because they are very interested in war fighting in Canada.
Dude, just think of relatively recent history. Okay. And I know World War I, people might say, well, that's not that recent. But in the globe, or in the historic scheme of the age of the world, it's relatively recent. If my histrionics is accurate, and I think I'm right here, I'd have to go back and look, but Canada entered World War I before we did, because they saw the the march towards tyranny,
The
and they said,
Expeditionary Force went over there, yes.
and they said, this is not good. This is not good. Not only is this not good for Canada, this is not good for the world. We need to step up. We need to send our fighting men over there. And remember, Steve, fighting men. That's all it was back then. There were no women in the infantry on the front lines storming across to fight the Germans. And now this. If you are a war fighter in Canada, you better not take tampons out of the men's bathroom. It's absolute insanity.
If you are a war fighter in Canada, and let's say you actually did get harmed in the effort to defend your homeland, and you're relying now on the universal healthcare community, you would hope that maybe at least they would do right by you. So because they're chopping off or creating fake penises and digging out fake vaginas, whatever the heck they're doing, and they're also trying to be inclusive, but they're not really inclusive of the war fighters. So third story from the Toronto Sun. Combat vet who says he was offered medical suicide comes forward.
Dude.
David Baltzer served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, told the Toronto Sun he was offered medical assistance in death, MAID is the acronym, in December 2019, possibly making him among the first Canadian soldiers offered the therapeutic suicide by his government. The offer stemmed from a disagreement that Baltzer had with his existing caseworker, so I guess their VA, where the topic of MAID came up during this phone call. Quote, I was in my lowest down point. I was just before Christmas, he told the Sun. He says to me, I would like to make a suggestion for you. Keep an open mind. Think about it. You've tried all this and nothing seems to be working, but have you thought about medical assisted suicide? Because look, it's much cheaper and easier just to get rid of this guy, right? The person who laid it all on the line for 2 tours in Afghanistan. We're going to suggest that he axes himself. But the crazy person who says, like, I need both genitalia because, sometimes I'm a him, sometimes I'm a her, they will bend over backwards to fly you out of the country to go get this medical procedure.
Man, it's these 3 Canadian stories have gotten worse and worse and worse. You want your soldiers to kill themselves now. I don't even know where to start with this one again. So maybe we will have to go heavy into scripture because a nation. Look, we all know I have an infantry background. My deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I find this utterly unconscionable that a quote unquote medical professional would say when you're at your lowest point, when you probably already are thinking, but maybe I should just eat the gun. Nothing's working. For them to come to you and say, "Hey, just think about it," it just is beyond the pale to me. But it really shows the depravity that is not just in Canada, but I really truly believe in a global scale right now. And I wonder when that happened, and then why he decided to come forward. Like, what's the time difference? Because when I think of my own struggles, whether it was post deployment or getting out of the army or through all this whistleblower trials that we've dealt with in the last 2.5+ years, which is absolutely insane. At the low points, if somebody would come to you and say, just die, uh, it only would make it easier to be like, oh, all right, maybe I was thinking correctly. That it's just
You're most suggestible, and it
yeah.
would be at the advantage fiscally for the government. And then also just for the bureaucrat who just doesn't want to deal with your garbage anymore. Right? I don't want to hear you sobbing. I don't want to hear about your hard times. I want to go and take my long lunch. Would just be much easier for me if you listen to my suggestion. Just keep an open mind. I'm not going to sell you really hard on this, exactly what I'm doing, so that you end your own life. Because I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. All right. Now, your background is in military. Both have a background in law enforcement. Got a couple stories about there I want to get to. Into the grab bag on a Saturday on the American Radicals podcast. And 2 pieces around the same story. Let's see if you can find a difference, though. Daily Post, the Palo Alto Daily Post. A police officer is arrested on suspicion of rape. I mean, man, that's awful. So, Redwood City Police say they have arrested a Belmont police officer on suspicion of rape. This is in California because as goes Canada, goes California. This officer, his last name is Gomez. He was born in Brazil and was a police officer in the Brazilian Air Force before coming to the United States. But I found a little bit more information from the Blaze. Non-citizen charged with rape became a California cop thanks to a Gavin Newsom.
Thanks, Gavin.
Charging affidavit reviewed alleged that 1 year into his marriage, Gomez, who is not an American citizen, but has a work permit, brutally beat his wife, striking her repeatedly in the face and stomach. He allegedly done so after seeing text messages on her phone with she was texting the ex-boyfriend. Not that she deserved to get beat over that, but that's probably what set him off. Governor Newsom, American Psycho, he ratified legislation in 2022 scrapping the requirement that police, highway patrol, and correction officers in California have to be U.S. citizens or permanent residents, and the law went into effect in 2023. So we have non-American citizens taking away or at least having the ability to take away the freedom of American citizens because our government hates us. And as a result, we brought in and imported this dude who tuned up his old lady. Oh, and that's the background. It didn't include the rape he committed too.
Same person or somebody else?
Same.
So he beat his.
Oh no, the rape victim.
Somebody else. Okay, so we got two victims here from a cop, which, as we talk about often, the government is supposed to be a deacon for your good, a servant for your good. They're not supposed to bear the sword in vain. They're supposed to punish evil, and they just lurk amongst us. And look, we're all human. We're all fallible. We are all sinful by nature, and we all make mistakes. But this is who you have filling your law enforcement ranks. This is the person who you say, let me give you the sword and go off and don't bear it in vain. But look at California. It trickles down from the top. Gavin Newsom wants the government to bear the sword in vain, just like Canada wants their warfighters to bear the sword in vain against themselves, because government always marches down the road to tyranny and turns to false gods and false idols and wants. I mean, I don't know how you square this circle with this guy. How did you miss these things and say, yeah, he could be a cop here?
I could easily see them saying like, oh, well, he was a member of the military. They probably did a decent job of vetting him in Brazil, who's not an ally. And just we got quotas to hit, right? We want to make sure we hit those DEI numbers. And look, you don't necessarily have to hire them. You could stand in the gap of deporting them, though, which is the next cop story that we have, again from the Blaze. Sheriff who claims to support women ignores an ICE detainer for an illegal alien accused of strangling a woman. All right, so there's a little background here because there's quite a bit on this guy, as you see the picture there and the picture of the sheriff, who's female. All right, April 2012, our bad guy, Wilmer Ramos Giron, he was deported following an arrest in Virginia for brandishing a firearm. He got back into the country and was arrested by ICE in 2019 on a federal warrant. He then was convicted and sentenced to 9 months in prison, and then they sent him off again. So this is now 2 deportations. Ramos Giron entered the U.S. illegally again a third time. January 27th this year, he was arrested by the Fairfax County Police after he allegedly brutally attacked a woman. The county prosecutor, his name is Steve Descano, struck a plea deal with this illegal alien that dropped all felony charges, and instead he pled guilty to a misdemeanor for brandishing a machete. ICE issued another detainer against him, because this is now the third time, at the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office the same day that he was arrested for brandishing the machete and brutally beating a woman. But the office for Sheriff Stacy Ann Kincaid apparently ignored the detainer. Justice has ignored 1,100 detainers from ICE so far under her leadership.
Wow.
Sheriff Kincaid seems to take pride in obstructing the efforts on immigration officials. She's even shrugged her shoulders at detainers, writing in a letter last July, which is tantamount to a written confession, that those detainers from ICE are an informal request that she is under no obligation to honor without a judicial warrant. And just, here's a picture of another face of evil, Sheriff Stacy Ann Kincaid. And it's a little bit tough to read, even for those who are watching here, but the original thing that it says on the website where there's like, meet the sheriff. Sheriff Stacy Ann Kincaid is the first woman to lead the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office in its 281-year history. And she's got a whole bunch of accolades. She's gotten awards from, she was the Influential Woman of Virginia Award from Lawyers Weekly. 3 years later, she received the Woman of Vision Award from the Junior League of Northern Virginia. And the only, I guess, silver lining to this entire story is that in April 24th, so last month, officers with ICE and Virginia State Police actually apprehended this guy. So a third time he's getting deported.
Well, that's good at least, but look at the harm that's been caused because of, again, someone in law enforcement not doing what they're supposed to do. I saw there it said that she's been a 36-year veteran of the sheriff's department.
How many people do you think she's arrested?
Yeah, and how do you I wanted to say serve, but she's not serving anybody but herself. How do you exist in a role as a law enforcement officer and then arrive at the pinnacle of your profession, the sheriff of your county? And I don't know if they're elected there or chosen by the governor or whatever. Most places they're elected. And so if you're elected to that position, I blame the people as much as I blame her. Why are you electing somebody like this? What the hell is wrong with you? And then 1,100 of these ICE detainers she's just ignoring. At what point is she going to be arrested? Because that's where this should end. She should be arrested.
She should be like Judge Dugan in Wisconsin, or the
Yeah.
other Trinidad harboring one down in New Mexico. That there needs to be government officials in handcuffs. The stakes should be the highest. If you use your political office to push up your political results in contravenance to the law, which is what the ICE detainer essentially functions as, then the stakes should be really high. But she's a member of preferred class, as is apparently in her eyes illegal aliens, who, as in the eyes of the Governor American Psycho, should be policing people and taking their freedom away. But they're all secondary to, as Canada has proven, the ultimate class of people in the eyes of the communist left in this country and all across the globe, and that is the dudes who feel pretty. And we go back into the grab bag with a nice little video for this one, and it deals with a Tesla arsonist.
Bria and John, the government wanted Owen McIntyre to spend the time before trial behind bars, but the judge in Boston sided with the defense in this case, which cited multiple medical issues facing the 19-year-old, including autism spectrum disorder, gender dysphoria, and ADHD. McIntyre's attorney argued the teen should be released citing serious and ongoing medical needs and treatments that could not or would not be provided while in federal detention.
So this dude burned a Tesla dealership, and typically there's a determination of whether or not the person should be held or they can be released and monitored, sort of like a home confinement, their conditions. That's how the federal detention typically works. And the argument was made that holding this guy in custody would be violative of his rights in some way, or at least make him more vulnerable medically because he has a unique condition that the Bureau of Prisons maybe can't handle. So his lawyer made the following argument, which I was able to pull from Fox 4, a local news affiliate here. Suspect in a Kansas City Tesla arson. Maybe you know the arresting agent, freed from federal custody. So the defense filing says that McIntyre is undergoing treatment for depression, so we should cut off his testicles, and is receiving gender-affirming care that began in March of this year. How convenient. And that care would likely be interrupted or terminated while he was in federal custody.
Yeah, it should be, because that's not government's role or function to give you some fake healthcare, because it's not healthcare. It's a fraud. It's a sham. It's a lie. And we talk about the doctrine of the lesser magistrate here pretty regularly, and it's where a lesser government authority, when a higher government authority is doing something wrong, the lesser government authority has a duty to intercede and to resist that unrighteous authority from the higher level of government. And a judge in Kansas City is not the highest level of government, but everybody along the chain here should be resisting this sham, this fraud. Similarly to the sheriff in Virginia, to the Brazilian cop in Palo Alto, where are the lesser magistrates intervening and saying, no, we're not going to comply with this evil, wicked, unrighteous government behavior.
How about the doctor? The doctor, what you saw in the video there, he's autistic. And there's definitely a correlation, if not a causation, between people who suffer from autism, or at least on the spectrum, because they're highly suggestible. And now we have this culture of, oh, you're going through some things, you're probably born in the wrong body. And there's now a cottage industry that's in the billions of dollars out of it, where we get these dudes who feel pretty, or at least we tell them that they probably feel pretty because they're on the autism spectrum, as opposed to actually treating that. We saying you'll be way happier, you won't be suffering anything if we just lop off the twig and berries, and definitely will not end in a higher level of suicidality for these people. But there's a doctor that's contributing to it, like the doctor in Texas, who's allowing a Canadian to come on down and dig out a fake vagina for him while keeping his phallus. This is completely insane. It's
Mhm.
insane, and it's all people who are not interested in doing the right thing, and they're just doing the thing that's personally serves their own agendas. And that's also what I think is a great pivot over to people who are interested in serving their own agenda, or at least lining their own pockets and living lives of luxury, while pretending to represent the huddled masses, the downtrodden. And that would be one Alexandria easily using her prefrontal cortex, and Bernie Sanders, who have teamed up to fly on luxury jets while
Mm.
going to rallies for the working class. Reported from headlineusa.com. The purported champions of the little guys, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, caught living large aboard a $15,000 per hour private jet
Per hour.
en route to a fighting the oligarchy rally. The campaign site solicits public donations to help fund the tour, claiming that it only requires a modest amount of resources to cover travel expenses because they're flying Southwest.
Dude. What is with government and wanting, I mean, they just want to live like princes and princesses. That's what this boils down to. And especially for them, it's do as I say, not as I do. Because what you're preaching is the absolute opposite of what you're doing. $15,000 an hour. You know, we've talked about Christopher Wray's malfeasance with the FBI plane. There was a story recently accusing Cash Patel of similar malfeasance, flying all around to UFC fights and to visit his girlfriend and whatever else. What is with this obsession of it? And look, at least with the FBI, their argument is, well, in case there's secure information that needs to be relayed to the director, that's why he's got to fly on the plane. I don't particularly buy that argument because wasn't it Louis Free who had one body man, no detail, and he flew regular coach like anybody else?
Yeah, and he carried a gun because he at one point had been an agent. I don't think he's got some issues there, but like
For
that
sure.
endeared himself to the agents for sure. And he had
For
like
sure.
one guy, and the story was that wherever he would travel, if he had to, he would go get like a trinket or some sort of memorabilia or keepsake for his kids. He would go to a gift shop or something, and then he would like hop out. They'd be like, "Sir, we got to go clear it." And he's like, "If the assassin is waiting in this
In
gift
the
shop
gift shop.
on
Yeah.
the off chance that the FBI director, who he'll recognize,
Yeah.
rolls in, it's just my day."
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, just a reasonable approach to your life, even if you are the director of the FBI. But these people are obsessed with just living large. Because I would imagine for Bernie and AOC, it's campaign donations that are paying for this plane, but they're flying around to go tell you how the oligarchy is awful while they're contributing to it and living large in it. It just,
They view themselves as royalty to lord
mm,
over you. They are entitled to that. And it doesn't matter if they have an R next to their name or a D or an I in the case of Bernie Sanders, because he's an independent. He just
sure.
caucuses with the
Yeah.
Democrats. He is the id of the socialist communist
Didn't he
Democrat
get
Party.
married in Russia or go on his honeymoon there or something? And
Yeah, he
but
got kicked out of a commune by a bunch of commies because he was too lazy.
well,
And
I mean that's the pinnacle of communism, isn't it?
speaking of people who like to lord over you, let's talk about how Jim Jordan is possibly the biggest disappointment in Congress from Revolver, which does bring some older information in, but I think this guy still sits on a reputation from a lot of people, particularly the Fox News watching audience out there. about being this fighter for the MAGA movement, and it just isn't so. So Revolver did this long piece and brought up some old revelations about one Jim Jordan, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, formerly the head of the House Weaponization Select Committee that you and I testified in front of, and the day we did that, May 18th, 2023, was our last communication with Congressman Jordan. So this comes from Revolver. There was a time when Jim Jordan looked like the future of the America First movement. The guy had the energy, the fight, and the guts to go toe-to-toe with the establishment. These days, though, many wonder what happened. Jordan still makes a round, still puts on the uniform. The firepower is missing, though. Something feels off. The follow-through just isn't there, if there ever was any follow-through.
Mhm.
It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment Jim Jordan stopped being the tip of the MAGA spear and started sounding more like just another empty suit Republican with a Twitter account.
Yep.
Instead of taking the big action we expected or driving the real change we needed, Jordan became known for drafting an endless string of strongly worded letters. It went nowhere, and tweeting fiery one-liners that made the rounds online but didn't move the needle in real life. To many, his social media account became a platform for rage tweets, which I mean, I don't follow him, but I don't know about that. And gratuitous clicks, which I know is a thing because they invited people to weaponization based on what their follower account was on Twitter. Whoever had the biggest account was invited, which is why you got bumped for Tulsi Gabbard and then Nicole Parker, FBI Barbie.
Mhm.
His posts weren't translating into actual outcomes. So this social media pattern, along with the slew of pointless letters, has led many supporters to question his motives. But while many in the base are quietly grumbling about Jim's lack of action, the media kept framing him as a hardliner, to include the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. And for those listening, it's entitled Relentless Wrestler. Jim Jordan is an unyielding combatant, whether grappling on the mat or in the halls of Congress.
Wow.
Back to Revolver. All right. In October 2023, the New Republic, though, wrote a blistering piece calling out Jordan's duplicity when it came to big tech, which I was actually able to find. Jim Jordan loves to attack big tech and accept their donations. Jordan has accepted more than $760,000 in total campaign donations from communications and electronics industry since he ran for Congress in 2006.
That's
So
got to be over 1 million now, right? Because this was in 2023. This article was
yeah,
posted.
so I mean, you're talking now 20 years and $750,000 from just those industries.
Dude.
Technology companies, industry-friendly organizations sponsored 17 trips for him over those 20 years. So like once a year, he's taking a vacay on behalf of big tech. According to legal expert Mike Davis, Jim Jordan is now pushing a move that would gut the Federal Trade Commission's ability to go after Facebook for its antitrust violations. I wonder why.
Hmm.
So just a fun revelation.
Yeah. For me, I can't help but think of our travails as whistleblowers because a lot of it was rooted with Jim Jordan. He was the head of that committee. He claimed to be a champion for whistleblowers, and recently he tweeted out something to the effect of, well, whatever the FBI, whatever Kash Patel decides to do with them, that's going to be the right answer. And I remember back when I was whistleblowing, when I was an active employee of the FBI, I was told, we're going to protect you. We're going to do everything we can. Just keep giving us information. Here we are. And then the strongly worded letters, there were many of them that touched on things that we all whistleblew about. And then just, I imagine that the conversations go like this when he's lobbying them for donations. Hey, I'm going to beat you guys up a little bit when we have these hearings because it's all performative. It's for show, and that's kind of my shtick. But don't worry, just keep donating to me. We're not going to take any real action. We're all on the same team. We're all part of the same club, and you ain't in it. So just keep donating, and it's going to be all good.
All right. One more story on the Saturday grab bag here on the American Radicals podcast. And this is like one that I didn't even thought about, but again, it was back to military culture, and maybe you could comment on it, Garrett. A retired Green Beret in Congress wants to ban GNC stores from military bases. Now, I worked at a Vitamin World, so I know it from the retail end, but not necessarily the consumption end. But with the bill title, it is called Military Installation Retail Security Act, MERS. Okay. His representative, his name is Pat Harrigan, Republican from North Carolina. It wants to ban companies from operating on military bases if they are owned or financially controlled by entities based in China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran. GNC is one of the most popular stores across the US for gym goers and health fanatics to buy protein powders, nutritional, dietary supplements. Spokesperson for Army and Air Force Exchange said that GNC operates 75 stores on Army, Air Force, and Space Force installations. A spokesperson for the Navy said that they have 8 stores on Navy bases, and the Marine Corps said that they have 9 stores, so quite a few of them. GNC operated stores at military bases as a U.S.-owned company, but they had an issue a couple decades ago where they went bankrupt. And in 2020, they were purchased by Harbin Pharmaceutical Group, which is a Chinese firm. So maybe, I mean, is it a national security issue, or is it more like we just don't want our soldiers funding China? Because if it's a Chinese-owned company, it's going to be owned by the government. So maybe there's like a symbolic gesture that is there. I don't necessarily think it alters the lethality one way or another. But then there's also the element of like, what are they putting in the supplements, right?
Yeah, that's the bigger question is what ingredients are there? And I think again back to my time in the military, there were certain aspects over those years because this is when pre-workout was kind of emerging and becoming a thing, and
You're banging that Synthesix hard.
jacked 3D or whatever, and that soldiers don't care, or at least in the infantry, they don't care where the company is based. They care about getting that next product, taking a scoop or 3 before PT because they get the tingles in their arms or whatever. And there were times where command would basically outlaw certain products
Didn't they
because
outlaw like Red Bulls because people were drinking them for hydration in Iraq as opposed to water?
what's funny about that is uh, while you're deployed, you can get an unlimited supply of Rippets from the DFAC, the dining facility there, and we'd load up every one of our trucks when I was in Iraq. We had a cooler in it or on top of it or whatever, and we would load it up. I mean, we put water in there too, but the things were loaded with Rippets, and they were like the little cans. Maybe people don't even know what a Rippet is. It's like a cheap knockoff version of Red Bull, and seriously, unlimited supply. But then, yeah, hey, you guys can't drink Red Bull. You're drinking too much Red Bull, but we can have unlimited supply of Rippets. That doesn't make any sense. And Copenhagen or whatever, and but when I think of this GNC story, what is more disconcerting to me is the amount of farmland that China is buying and the amount of properties that they're buying in our country. I don't care about GNC nearly as much as I care about that.
Yeah, it's just going for the headline splash, right? And not necessarily making like the fundamental institutional changes that we need to push back on. But this is a nice symbolic gesture, and like, I don't harbor any sort of animosity towards this congressman. Like he sees a problem, and if it's easily fixed, okay. Then we'll get the vitamin worlds in there, which is a whole nother experience that it's fun when you're working in there because they make you wear a white polo shirt so you sort of look like a pharmacist, and it's very well lit as opposed to GNC, which is kind of dim. And people come in and ask you questions about medical issues because you're wearing a white polo that you are not qualified
Yeah,
to answer.
the appeal to authority.
uh, all right. I have a fun palate cleanse, Garrett, but close out your thoughts on the day.
Yes, sir. We're back in First John again. First John 2, verses 15 through 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever.
John writes that by faith, the Christian is able to overcome the world in 1 John 5, 4 and 5. In our text, he says the world passes away. In chapter 3, verse 1, he says the world is ignorant of God. In 3:13, he says the world hates believers. In 4:1, he says it's the abode of false prophets. In 4:3, it's the abode of the Antichrist. And in 4:5, it's the abode of unbelievers. And last, the whole world is controlled by the evil one. It is obvious here that when John refers to world in this text, he's referring to that world that is under the control of our adversary, the devil. That world that is spiritual and ideological and at war with our King and his kingdom. And we are told, do not love that world. Not at all. Listen to Calvin. He had said before that the only rule for living religiously is to love God. But as when we are occupied with the vain love of the world, we turn away all our thoughts and affections another way. This vanity must first be torn away from us in order that the love of God may reign within us. Until our minds are cleansed, the former doctrine may be iterated 100 times, but with no effect. It will be like pouring water on a ball. You can gather no, not a drop, because there is no empty place to retain the water. Like pouring water on a ball. When your affections, when your love is pointed toward the world, there is no room for the love of God. Because when your love and your affections are pointed toward the world, they are pointed toward that which opposes God.
And think of that right there. Think of all the stories we covered here today. That is the summation of the 3 stories from Canada, of Nina Jankowicz and the disinformation board, of the rapist cop who also beat his girlfriend, of the anti-law sheriff in Virginia. Every single story we covered is because people, and in this case, primarily government, are pointing their love towards things of the world. And they're falling into that satanic trap who, when he mentioned it there, the ruler of this world is the devil. That is really the epitome of it. It also has me harken back to what we covered earlier, I don't know, however many episodes ago, when we were going through Ephesians 6 and the armor of God, and how it is a war and a battle in the spiritual realm that seeps into the physical. And we could see it all around us just with the stories we covered here today.
Well, that's well said, Garrett. As always, you talk about a spiritual battle. We got an upcoming battle here in the Friend household because I'm in Florida, so it's always football season. So I'm about to head out to a flag football tournament. Go Hawks, we bleed orange, and I found the perfect coach that could fill in a pinch for your child's athletic team in this era when we need to take stuff a little bit more seriously.
Our goals are to hit dingers. Everybody better have their eyes on me. Eyes on me, Rylan. Hit dingers. Disgrace the pitcher's family. Make the other players cry and stomp their butts into the ground. Does everyone understand that? There's 2 types of people in this world. There's winners and there's losers. And just so that we're clear, every time we step on this field, our goal is to be a winner. And if your dad has said, oh, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, just as long as you have fun, well, I hate to say it, your dad's a loser.
That's how we roll in Florida, the land of milk and honey.
I love it. That's awesome.
All right, guys. This was fun. Appreciate it as always. If you haven't already, just reminder, smash the thumbs up and give us a follow. Subscribe to the audio format of the show as well. Hope you all have a great weekend. Back with you Tuesday, 10:30 here, rumble.com/amradpod. Until then, guys, have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.